You know, being on lockdown gives you the opportunity to reflect and take a little trip down memory lane. And no one has been doing nostalgia better these days than Breitling. Hi everyone, and welcome to Shaluso, and welcome to a slightly different perspective. A user from the channel sent me some feedback regarding the fact that half of my face was usually covered in a shadow. That's down to the lighting in my apartment, and unfortunately, because it's lockdown, I can't really order any lighting in. So I took some time to rearrange my living room. Hopefully this way I point a little bit closer towards the light. Hopefully it looks a little bit more balanced. But anyway, today we are going to be talking about Breitling, specifically their latest releases. I was actually going to release and make this video about a week ago, but then just before I was about to record it, I saw the notification about this webcast that Breitling did, and I thought, okay, maybe I should wait and see what some of the new novelties are, because Breitling has actually been very active in terms of their new releases, not only during this crisis, but for the entire 2020. They've released pretty much a new watch every month. So I'm going to cover all of Breitling's new releases, including, of course, the ones just released on Breitling's Webcast Summit. But let's start with the most important one, and obviously the most recent one, and that is the new Breitling Chronomat. The Chronomat, in my opinion, is a watch that has been so stuck in the 2000s for the last 20 years or so. Definitely a carryover from the time of bigger watches, blingier watches, always in high polish. I think to a degree it was really stuck in that time, and I think that's something that a lot of models in Breitling's range had suffered for a while, but then slowly but surely over the last few years, especially during the Georges Kern era, they've started to normalize, get to more classical proportions, classical designs, and more timeless designs. I think that's the key thing. A lot of their designs would have looked great when they came out, but they were very, very dated. And the Chronomat, in my opinion, was probably the most affected by that. So what has Breitling done? Well, they've taken us down to a trip to the 80s. The Chronomat name has been around since the 1940s, but it really came into its own during the 80s, especially with the special edition of the Frecce Tricolori that was made for the Italian Air Force. And what they've done with this new model is they've harkened back to that 80s design, and I think they've done an amazing job. They've reduced the size to 42 millimeters, they've given it a much more low-key look, but it still has a lot of 80s flair. Obviously, the biggest thing standing out is that bracelet. It's not personally for my taste, or at least it's not the first thing I would look to, but it is something that could probably grow on me. And as someone who absolutely loves 80s design and 80s flair in general, I think that it definitely is something I could grow to love. And on top of that, it just looks distinctive. If you're gonna look like you're from an era, look like an era that was just exemplified by style, not an era like the 2000s, which was pretty much just exemplified by size. No one ever really thought that the Big Mac was a design icon either. But in addition to that, they have of course kept the B01 movement, which actually debuted on the Chronomat, so I think that's quite appropriate. They've given it a ton of different variations. My personal favorite is the copper dial. I'm normally not a fan of sort of copper, brown, salmon dials, any of that color range I'm not really a fan of, but with this they seem to have nailed it. This new watch is set to MSRP at about $8,100 and about $8,250 for the limited edition. And that's something I admire with Breitling, is that they don't price up or put too much of a markup on their limited editions in most cases, because reality is you're just getting the same watch with a different colorway in those cases, unless of course they've done a lot of material changes. So right out of the gate, a great addition to the Breitling catalog, and I really hope it's a success for them. And I look forward to seeing what future variants look like. Be interesting for me at least to see if maybe they do it on an alternate bracelet and give you an option of choosing. I think there's a lot of options they can have with that, and so I definitely think that's a great way to start out the new collection. Moving on, we have the Navitimer 35. Now, I don't talk a lot about women's watches on this channel, but at least as far as the statistics show, there is 1% of my viewership that is female, and I don't want to neglect it. So I would like to talk about the new Navitimer 35, which is of course the Navitimer sized down for women. At 35 millimeters, it is still on the proportionally bigger side as far as what classical women's sizes go, but it's not diminutive. I think if they have done a 28 millimeter, it just would have looked too ridiculous. And the other thing I like about it is that it is still an automatic. It's based on ETA 2824, and I think that's a great sign that they're appreciating, that women do appreciate the mechanical aspects of a watch as well. They could have just gone the cheap route, made it a quartz, kept the pricing the same, and it probably still would have sold. But I think that it's important to recognize that there are women within this hobby who are interested in the mechanical parts of the watch, that it is an automatic, and I'm glad that they did that as well. Styling wise, obviously it looks roughly the same as what you'd expect from a Navitimer. Has the slide rule. It's not a chronograph, but it does have that nice big dial. And I think it's a great little addition to the collection and something that can appeal to a new segment. And then rounding out with yesterday's releases, we have the Superocean Heritage 57. This is part of their capsule collection. Another one of those models that's almost a one-for-one recreation of a previous model or design. In this case, the Superocean from 1957. With this, they've put an ETA 2892 on the inside to keep it nice and thin. It is only 100 meters water resistant, but also it only measures 9.9 millimeters tall. It's an extremely sleek watch. They've given it a mesh bracelet that actually has a conforming end link as opposed to having just a straight bar. I think that was a nice little touch and makes it look a little bit more streamlined. It has a concave ceramic bezel. So again, they've made little tweaks to make it more modern, but on the same token, I think with a lot of respect for what the original was. And they also did release a rainbow edition, which I think is a lot of fun. Again, not something that maybe I would get personally. It doesn't really suit my style, but I definitely can admire them for releasing it. And in my view, just a great exercise in releasing fun variations. A lot of companies within this industry tend to have a little bit of a pole up their ass when it comes to having fun. So I think it's nice from time to time when you see a serious company, established company with so much history, recognize that sometimes you can just have fun with a watch. So it's another great release that, in my view, still respects the history of the brand and the watch itself. So that rounds out those launched from the webcast. But the great thing about Breitling is that even before this crisis started hitting and everyone was inside, Basel World cancellations, etc., they were already releasing new watches online, and they've really embraced this online medium. So definitely kudos to them for having their big release via an online webcast with the CEO himself, putting a face to the brand and really explaining and connecting with viewers. It's one of the few brands I think that is starting to do social media and YouTube right. So power to them for that. But in addition to that, they have had other releases this year as well. They've been releasing pretty much one every month. So the first one I'd like to highlight, and it was another one that was affected by COVID-19, and that is the Breitling Premier for Bentley. I'm actually going to be reviewing another Breitling Premier for Bentley in my next video, but this one was supposed to be released in March at the Geneva Auto Show, but obviously because that was canceled, they released it online anyway. Internally, it's all still the same Breitling B01 movement. In this case, they don't have a date, but the big difference is, of course, the colorway. So the colors are all designed to match the interior of the new Bentley Continental GT convertible. It's got a lot of similar textures and tones in terms that you can actually spec those on the car itself. I like the Breitling for Bentleys now because they're not really overt, really pushing the Bentley angle from a branding perspective. Instead, what they do is they make it evoke the same feeling. And especially with the Premier line, which is, in my view, it's purely a luxury watch. It's not a racing watch. It's not a sports watch. It's just a luxury chronograph. Same thing with a luxury car. It's the GT of watches in that sense. And I think that they've really epitomized that with this model as well. Next, we have one of my favorite releases from this year, and that is the Breitling AVI 765 re-edition. This is a re-edition of a 1953 pilot's watch that they used to have, the 765, and it is another, again, almost one-for-one re-edition when it comes to the look. Everything down to the fact that the minute counter is in 15-minute increments with lots of Luminova painted on it. It has a bidirectional bezel, it has the pump-style pushers, and on the inside, though, they've given it a modern movement, specifically the B09, which is a manual version of the B01. So you're getting all of the look, charm, and feel of the vintage watch, but with a completely modern internals. And I like the fact that they made it manual wind. I think that keeps it true to what it would have been in the 50s. I imagine it was manual wind in the original as well. And also it helps them make it thinner, because the reality is that the B01 is a lot thicker than perhaps what previous movements would have been, and it still carries its COSC certification, 70-hour power reserve, and is actually, in my opinion, decorated a little bit better than the B01. The only thing is that they don't have a see-through case back, so you don't really get to see that, unfortunately. But still a great watch, and definitely something that would have me thinking twice about should I get that or maybe a Breguet Type 20. Both amazing looking pilot's watches, and I think the Breitling really would have you thinking twice or three times. And then the last watch is the Breitling Top Time re-edition. The original Top Time was released in the 1960s. They actually did have one featured as a Bond watch in the movie Thunderball. However, this one is the Top Time with what's known as the Zorro dial. So it looks almost like it's got a mask going across its subdials. A very, very cool vintage re-edition. And one thing what they did to keep this more accessible is they didn't give it the B01, which would have raised the price. Instead, it's based on a Valjoux 7753 with the date removed and with the hour counter removed as well. So definitely something that's going to be reliable, even though it's not an in-house movement. But that's also whereas that AVI re-edition costs around $8,000. This one costs around $4,000 or $5,000, so they do at least pass on those savings to you. And the other cool thing about this is that it is one of the first watches to feature authentication through their new blockchain digital passport. Another thing that Breitling has released this year is a new system of authentication, so all of your warranty information, your registration, everything that would have been the papers element of box and papers is now digitized. And I think that's a great strategy, especially in the long term, because one of the things you can do is you can actually transfer ownership, much like you would with a car. And that allows you to be able to actually trace the provenance of a watch to know when you're buying it pre-owned, okay, who has it, who owns it. And also it allows the company to keep track of the ownership of their watches so they can manage supply, so they can manage perhaps to repurchase watches if they're significant to the history. I think there's a lot of benefits to doing that, and it just adds more accountability on the pre-owned side as well. And I think this epitomizes really what Breitling has been doing. They've been doing a very conscious push to doing things online, to doing things in a more modern way. And I think that's what a lot of these watch companies should do, is just embrace the future without forgetting the past, but understanding there are definite advantages to getting with the times at the end of the day. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these releases? Which one is your favorite? And also, what do you think of the way in which they released it? I have a feeling that Breitling would have done a similar thing even if there wasn't this current crisis going on where we all have to be inside. And I think that's a great idea. The fact that they're embracing the digital world, that they're embracing video as a medium, all of this outreach, all of these efforts, I think are a great thing. But I'd love to know in the comments below, what do you think about them? And of course, if you want to see all of the infographics featured throughout this video, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. If you like the video, please do like it and share it. And if you want to keep seeing new watch videos, make sure you subscribe to Shaluso as well. In any case, thanks for watching this video. Stay safe, and we'll catch you on the next one.